Chapter 24. Friday, 1:30 p.m. Mandy. 2 hours later, I lay on my stomach, shirt torn, blood running down my face, wishing I had a flamethrower. Death by chainsaw was too good for those thorny bastards. It was the second time I had worked my way from Driscoll's lawn to Adeline's on the other side of the grove. The worst part was getting turned around to get back on my side of the trees before the little girl, Mandy, saw me. With Gabriella covered in blood fresh in my mind, I didn't want a little girl to see a man, his back wet with blood, crawling into her playground. Not to mention that it was against the HOA covenants for me to be there. Maybe Adeline could claim she was whipping me. I knew I was stalling. Since the last return trip, a 3-inch thorn had almost cost me an eye. "Hello?" The small voice came from slightly above the tiny purple tennis shoes that appeared inches from my nose. Hoping she would just go away, I froze. "Hello?" the voice said again softly. Maybe she had a short attention span. I didn't move. "Hello?" the voice said a little louder. Why couldn't she be inside playing a video game like a normal kid? "Hello?" the voice yelled, and 2 dark eyes peered at me just above the tops of the shoes. I had trouble meeting them because I couldn't twist my head sideways like that without sticking a thorn in my ear. I lifted my head and a thorn gouged into my skull. She straightened her head, so we were nose to nose. "Are you okay?" Her breath smelled like apple and fresh laundry. I said, "Stop. Just stay there." Her nose wrinkled at my beer breath. A bloody man in blood-stained clothes smelling like beer in the early afternoon should have sent her screaming for help. I began to have my doubts about her mother. I know. It's stickery. You have owies." Before I could growl, she reached a tiny hand above my face and pulled the branch with the thorn from the top of my head. She held it there and pulled back to look me in the eye. She was so close that my eyes crossed, and still, the little runt didn't run. I closed one eye to bring her into focus. I can't move it. Put your head down, like you going to sleep," she said. When I hesitated, her dark eyes narrowed dangerously. "It's hard to hold up," she pointed out reasonably. I pulled my hand over and carefully laid my head down on it, facing away from her. A little head appeared, resting the side of its face on a hand. "My name is Mandy. I'm 3. In 8 days, I will be 4. How old are you?" It was a damn good question, and I had to think about it. "That's okay. My mommy says not everyone knows how old they are. Do you know your name?" "Paul. My name is Paul," I quickly said, before she could tell me it was okay to be stupid again. "Do you remember how old you are? No? Well, that's okay," a different voice said tersely. "You're right, Mandy, that's okay. I'm proud of you. Now, can you get up and let Mommy talk to this man?" "Thanks, honey. Just stand over there." Running shoes on slim ankles appeared. I jerked my head up. 2 thorns dug painfully deep into my scalp. "He keeps doing that, Mommy. You should tell him to put his head down." 2 little purple shoes at the end of chubby legs appeared next to the slim ankles. Painfully keeping my head raised, I noticed that the slim ankles were attached to shapely legs. The purple shoes went up on tiptoes. "I don't think he is very smart," Mandy informed her mother in a whisper. "That's not nice, honey. We don't say things like that, remember? Now move back so Mommy can talk to the man, okay? Good." A shovel blade appeared next to the shapely legs. "Paul, it's Paul, right? Would you please tell me what you are doing talking to my daughter, now, before I call the police?" Adeline. It's Adeline, right? Would you give me a second?" I slowly worked a hand out to push the thorns up and out of the top of my head. That let me raise my head enough to see almost up to her waist. The shovel blade went out of sight, which I took as a bad sign. Wait, I was looking for a fence line," I yelled. "What?" The fence line. I thought if I could find an old fence line, it would show who owns these fucking trees. Sorry about that. I'm not used to being around kids." The shovel blade lowered slowly back to the ground in front of me. However, she also took a step back, probably to give her room to swing. "What does an old fence line look like?" I shifted to ease the pressure of a branch of thorns punching more holes into my head. The shovel blade disappeared again. Old posts, maybe some rails or wire, but hopefully old posts. No one ever digs them out," I said through clenched teeth. And Did you find any? Adeline asked in a cautious voice. Yes. Here, I'll show you one. She hesitated and then said, Okay. I cursed under my breath until I came to the remains of an old post I had found. Brushing the dead leaves away, I slowly twisted my head to look through a gap in the branches. A pretty adult oval face peered back at me. Another pretty little face popped up beneath. This is one. The tree trunks are on Driscoll's side. There's another post back where I started, and it's the same thing. I'm sorry. It was worth a try, I said softly. I see. Could there be 2 fence lines? I shook my head, which got me a thorn in the ear, and she winced with me. No, I don't think so. I worked my side pretty hard first. Then why come to my side? Like I said, it was a long shot. But if there were 2 lines of posts, it wouldn't be clear whose trees these are, I explained. Her large dark eyes looked from me to the post, back to me. Her lips compressed into a thin line. I pulled my hands under me for a rapid retreat, guaranteed to shred my back. But she was only trying to keep back the tears that welled up and trickled down her face. Impatiently brushing them away, she said, That may be... No, that is by far the kindest thing anyone in this neighborhood has ever done for me. I'm sorry I acted as I did. It's just that I'm a mother and, well, Adeline, I get it. I wouldn't want a stranger talking to my daughter if I had one either, especially a guy like me. She kind of trapped me. Her mouth twitched and she said, She can do that. You need to get out of there. There are snakes. Using the shovel for support, she reached in and gingerly pulled up the branch threatening my back. I inched out as she shifted sideways to give me room. Oh, my God, you're back, she said softly. She continued to hold the branch to allow me to step out, and I brushed against her. Embarrassed, I backed into the damn tree. She giggled. Enough already. I won't bite her or hit you with a shovel. Come up to the patio so we can take care of those scratches. It's okay. I am, or was, a nurse. You're lucky that you didn't get a thorn in that eye. That's a nasty puncture next to it. I was serious about snakes. I thought I heard a rattle last week. There are snakes in there. Bull snakes. I didn't hear any rattles, but there are a lot of big grasshoppers this time of year. And they sound kind of like a rattlesnake. You'll know when it's a rattlesnake. Believe me. Adeline nodded and said, Then I guess I've never heard a rattlesnake. I know I've never seen one. I don't think you'd have any along a golf course. Lots of activity, and they tend to kill any snakes they find, especially rattlers. She nodded doubtfully and led me across the lawn to a shaded patio. I could see why Adeline wanted the Russian olive grove of trees. They were old and tall, and in addition to protecting Mandy from projectiles launched by elite duffers, they provided shade, not a small thing in the Colorado altitude and lengthening summers. The playhouse I had seen on Google Earth sat between the Russian olives on the southwest and an old elm tree on the southeast side of the yard. Next to the playhouse was a low, stone-walled garden overflowing with impatiens. From morning to night, Mandy had her own shaded, private glade. I felt a small hand grasp the end of my fingers and tug. I turned and looked down. Mandy shook her head and made a motion for me to bend down. Mandy? Her mother said. I said, It's okay, and bent over. Does it hurt? Mandy asked, looking at the trickle of blood running down my cheek. No, it's just a scratch, I said, using my adult voice. I twisted my head up at Adeline, raised my eyebrows in apology, and said, I'm sorry. I haven't been around little kids very much. Basically, not at all. I looked back at Mandy and said, No, Mandy, it doesn't hurt. It's just a scratch. Mandy didn't buy it. She cocked her head and then stood on her toes to reach out and stroke my scarred cheek. Not that, silly, this. If it does, I can kiss it and make it feel better. Or Mommy can. She's good at that. Her hands felt like soft flower petals. No, it doesn't hurt anymore, but thanks for asking. As I straightened, Mandy grabbed my shirt and pulled me back down. For a creature less than 3 feet tall, she was strong. I allowed her to lower my head. She released my collar and put her little hands over my ears. I froze. There was a reason I stayed away from kids not old enough to smoke in the parks. She stared into my eyes and, before I could move, kissed me on the sneer-side cheek. Then she released me, stepped back, and motioned for me to rise with a princess-like wave of her hand. It will be better now. Are you going to stay and play with us? I don't have many friends to play with. I rose slowly, stopped my hand from rubbing my cheek, and looked at Adeline, who shrugged. She does that. Good thing you didn't wipe it off or you'd have to go through it again. She smiled at the cute little rugrat. Mandy, I need to fix his owies. Maybe afterward we can convince him to have lunch with us. Adeline looked at me. If you have time, I mean. We eat kind of early and would love the company. We walked to a covered patio with hanging plants and bright cushioned chairs occupied by different dolls. I need to introduce you. Then I can tell you where to sit, Mandy informed me. Adeline smiled and said, We have playdates with friends that live across the river and just about anywhere but here. So she takes her friends on the chairs very seriously. I'll be right back with a first aid kit. When she returned, I sat in a chair across the table from Mandy, who was lecturing her crew on manners. Adeline directed me. Now, take off that shirt. Oh my God! Those trees did all that? Wait, these scrapes on your shoulder aren't from today, but they aren't old either. No, they happened a couple of days ago, I said after thinking about it. It seemed like a lifetime, which, in a way, was true. Are you accident-prone? Oh, sorry, she said, and looked away from my face, a flush darkening her olive skin. No, it's okay. It comes with the territory of taking care of old homes. She focused on cleaning my new and old wounds. Pointing to my ring, she said, You're married. Was. She was murdered when I got this, I heard myself say, and felt my hand touch the scar. Her eyes opened wide, and she put a hand over her mouth. I wasn't silly. I was stupid, and I had no idea why I said that to a complete stranger. I said, It's been years, but I can't take the ring off. She looked away from me, rolling a ring around on her finger. Almost 3 years for me. In fact, 3 years the day after next. This is always a hard time for me. Edmund would have been a great father. Do you have children? Oh, I'm sorry, you said you didn't have much experience, but her face flushed deep red as she struggled with the thought that perhaps I had lost more than a wife. Mandy saved both of us by telling us we were being rude to not include her in the conversation. Adeline sighed, went inside, and left me with the little princess. It was a 5-way conversation between me, Mandy, and each of her friends who Mandy spoke for, using different voices. I told her I knew someone I might start speaking to, and when she asked who, I almost told her. But something in those sweet, innocent, probing, suspicious eyes stopped me. I wouldn't be surprised if she faked mispronouncing words. And what was it about her and her mother that turned me into a blabbermouth? Never mind. I can't remember her name. Her? I didn't answer, but stared into those dark eyes, trying to sort out the intelligence from the innocence. Mandy rolled her eyes and said, That's okay. Do you remember how old you are yet? I did, but I was damned if I was going to tell her. Her mother saved me by emerging from the house with food. It had been a very long time since a woman made me a meal. Gabriella couldn't boil an egg. Looking at the pile of sandwiches, I asked, Does everyone at the table eat? She blushed. No, it's just that it's been a long time since I made lunch for a man, and you look like you need some food. I decided the new me needed manners. I took a sandwich and searched for something to say. Your husband went to New York to help with the pandemic? Her sandwich stopped halfway to her mouth. Nurse Ratched mentioned it, I said hurriedly. It took a moment. Then the sandwich finished its journey. Adeline swallowed and grinned at me. I thought I was the only one who called her that. I grinned back. You gotta be careful who you talk to around here. It'd probably be a big ticket. I'm getting quite a few, and I've only been here a couple days. She motioned around the table and said, My crew knows how to keep their mouth shut. You guys talking about Ms. Ratched? Mandy asked. I choked. Mandy got up and patted my back. She had a strong slap for an almost 4-year-old. Plus, she unerringly managed to hit every scrape on my back. The new and almost new. Adeline choked back a laugh when I winced, rolled her eyes and said, Sorry, too many years nursing, I guess. The tough guys are always little babies. She's strong for her size, I replied gruffly. I would have faked choking to show that I could take it as well as a woman. But Mandy watched me and looked a little too ready to help again. The kid was starting to scare me. Can I ask why you stay here? It's none of my business, but I just got here and I can't wait to leave. I said. I don't have a choice. After Edmund died, I tried to sell it. Historical Society and the HOA make it impossible to get what we paid for it. And the Historical Society keeps me from making the repairs the HOA says I need to make. And this started when you tried to sell? Yes, don't get me wrong, we bought this place too fast and without thinking it through. A member of the family who inherited it offered us a great deal, but we had to move fast. And it made all of Edmund's hard work to get himself through med school seem worth it. But after we moved in, we discovered we had made a terrible mistake. Huh, how's that? It became pretty clear we weren't getting into the country club, and we would be the only ones not in the club. I take it Edmund wanted to join the country club. Sure, at first. It took a while for us even to get to it. Edmund's parents came over from China, same as mine. Can I ask when the historical folks started giving you problems? Like I said, I have some experience taking care of old homes. She thought about it and said, after Edmund died. We had never heard from them before that. And Edmund had made some improvements. I nodded and said, let me guess, some of the Littleton Historical Board live here. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion that she kept out of her voice. Yes, that's occurred to me, but it doesn't make any sense because they never seemed to care before. I don't understand what's happening. Do you know something I don't? I was now sure I knew exactly what was happening. Yet, I bit my tongue. Too much was at stake for this woman. I wanted to be sure. I decided to talk to a few people before I left town. No, I'm sorry. I've seen this happen before when you get on the radar for some reason or another. When you're just the guy fixing things, people forget you're even there and talk. Mostly they talk about the lawyers. Her pretty face sagged, looking older and very tired. Mandy asked to be excused and went inside. Adeline waited until she was out of sight before turning back to me. A month ago, I decided to hell with it. I realized that part of why I resisted was because I didn't like being bullied. I thought if I toughed it out, sooner or later somebody living here would become a friend or maybe even help. Finally, I realized that no one would take on the Ratchet crowd. Maybe they all aren't like her, but none of them will risk their precious country club memberships for a chink. She saw the guilt in my eyes and shrugged. The trees aren't soundproofed, and it isn't the first time. At least she's honest about her racism. Cottonwood supports all kinds of charities. They help people move up, as long as they don't move here. Ratchet doesn't seem to buy into it, I observed. She pursed her lips and studied me carefully. Not in front of you. Either you're fooling her or you're trying to fool me. I could tell she saw the guilt in my eyes by how hers slid from my face to her lawn. I needed to thank her for lunch and leave. One way or another, I knew I would never again have lunch with this delicate woman with a steel backbone. Adeline, I'm pretty sure we'd not be sitting here if you knew who I was and what I've done. Ratchet assumes a white man doing manual labor is on her side, even if they don't admit it. You thought that the educated, successful people here would be like you. It isn't that simple, I guess. I'm not a very deep guy with a social conscience, and I sure as hell don't set a high bar. But Ratchet and the crowd in this town could walk under my bar using stilts and wearing top hats. She leaned back from me, and I realized how much anger had crept into my voice. Embarrassed, I looked away. When I looked back at her, she was studying me, trying to figure out who she had invited to lunch. You can't sell, can you? I gently asked. She shrugged and said, no, if I try, they say they will bury me with liens, lawsuits, you name it. They will tell me when I can sell and for how much. And you have no idea why? Other than having a chink to kick around, no. My lawyer tells me they have the money and the connections to pull it off. She suggests I wait and see. Of course, by then, I'll be broke, which she thinks is the whole idea. Bankruptcy? She frowned away the tears of anger and murmured, same difference. They'll challenge it. My lawyer says it's a squeeze play. Do you know how hard it is in Denver to find a lawyer that will take on an HOA? I shook my head. No, I thought those guys would do anything for a dime. She smiled ruefully. You'd think. Then Mandy came to the doorway, and I realized how narcissistic my plan had been. Whoever was coming for me didn't care about a mother and her child becoming collateral casualties in a gunfight or a snatch job. I needed to pull the trigger on the plan and put a lot of easily tracked distance between this little family and me. I wanted Dragna, Nikki, the FBI, and the marshals to watch me drive down the highway. Somewhere, hundreds of miles from Cottonwood, I would turn onto a country road and go dark. I would figure out how to best help Adeline and Mandy while driving. Standing quickly, I thanked Adeline, Mandy, and the lunch crowd for a wonderful time. Looking confused and hurt, Adeline rose to her feet and fist-bumped the hand I offered. Mandy looked up at me.
"Are you really leaving? Don't you want to play with me in my house?" she asked,
pointing to her little house in the shade of her glade. I would love to, Mandy, but I have to go. I'm sorry, I said, feeling deeply sad at uttering the most honest words I had ever spoken. She stared into my eyes and then held out her fist as she had seen her mom do. I gave it a little bump, and she ran to her playhouse. Clenching my jaw and swallowing, I walked around the grove at the front of the house. I couldn't resist walking back down to a break in the grove, hidden from the patio, where I could see Mandy. She was bringing her crew to her playhouse one by one, telling each what she planned for the afternoon. I pulled out my cell phone and set the trigger for midnight. Sometimes you plan, yet more than anyone likes to admit, usually the plan comes to you. Then I gave myself a few more minutes to watch a little girl who might never have to worry about errant golf balls, even if her stubborn mother decided to stick it out. And soon, her mother might have more than bad options. She might have opportunities. As for me, I felt truly alive for the first time since I woke up in the hospital. My joy dissolved into despair, not because I had so little time left, but because I had squandered what life Dr. Weeble had given me. Feeling the wetness on my face, I brushed away the tears from the side I could feel and automatically moved my hand to the other. I stopped, remembering a little girl's kiss. She was right. I was silly. I had turned back to the mansion when I heard it. The sound came from behind me in their backyard. As I told Adeline, you always know when it's a rattlesnake. I cursed. I must have flushed it out from the brush beneath the trees. Crashing back through the thorns, I burst out of the trees and saw Adeline running for the playhouse. "Stop!" I yelled. "Get the shovel," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Please, for Mandy's sake," I pleaded softly without looking at Adeline. Forcing a smile, I walked towards Mandy, who stood trembling in front of her playhouse, transfixed by a triangular head raised in front of her face. The snake was between us, and I knew I didn't have time to work my way around. It was big for a rattlesnake, its thick body tightly coiled to strike, slitted cold beady eyes and a red forked tongue flicking in and out, weaved in front of Mandy's face, trying to sense the slightest movement of its target. It would strike her face and neck more than once. If she fell, it would coil around her and keep striking. I still had nightmares from the time I had seen a rattlesnake attack a newborn lamb. Trying desperately to control the fear racing through my body, I edged closer. "Mandy, honey, don't move. Just look at me, honey. Guess what? I remember how old I am." As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew it was a terrible, stupid thing to say. Mandy's eyes moved to mine, and she started to clap. I jumped forward, trying to step on the coiled snake. I was short by a foot, but my movement and the sound of my foot coming down made it whip around. I kept my eyes on Mandy as I felt the fangs pierce my right calf. Mandy, her eyes wide with fear, jumped back and screamed, "Mommy! Mommy!" Instinctively, I lowered my left hand to protect my groin, and fangs lanced into my wrist. Mandy ducked under my right hand, and I grabbed her hair. For an instant, her round little face was inches away from the hissing, thrashing reptile, its mouth open, its long fangs dripping poison. I whipped my left hand sideways, brushing against the side of Mandy's face and connecting solidly with the fanged mouth. Filled with adrenaline, I didn't feel the next strike. With my right hand, I grabbed Mandy by the back of her dress and lifted her above my head. Jumping back, I strained to hold a screaming bundle of fear and anger above my head, while getting free of the snake between my feet. I felt it strike the back of my left ankle, and then I was backing away. The snake, mad with its own fear and anger, was striking, recoiling, and striking again, its venom exhausted. It was just letting me know that it was not giving up. Keeping my eyes on it, I backed up as it writhed forward to continue the fight. I felt Adeline take the other angry and biting creature out of my hands. Then she pressed something into my right hand. "Get inside!" I snapped, and the sounds of Mandy's angry screams faded. I gripped the long-handled spade Adeline had brought to take care of the last snake she found under her Russian olive trees. Me. Then I stepped towards the hissing snake. It coiled and lowered its head into coils for a lunging strike. "Your turn, motherfucker," I muttered. This was something I had done more than a few times. Live and let live isn't an option in a trailer park on the prairie. First-timers go for the head. I took a full swing and chopped down on the center of the coil. I was angry and hurt and wanted vengeance. My first blow split the snake into 2 parts. Rage made me swing again and again until short, thick, twisting ropes thrashed, tumbling against one another, spraying blood and green entrails onto the grass. Separating the head from one of the ropes took 2 tries. Then my rage eased. I scooped the head up, its jaws opening and closing. Its eyes, not yet glazed, looked directly into mine with instinctual, mutual hatred. I started to toss the head into the grove of trees, but stopped when I had a vision of little Mandy crawling around looking for it. I could feel myself start to shake as the adrenaline faded. I walked to the end of the backyard, where it met the fairway rough. Then, holding the end of the shovel, I catapulted the head into the middle of the fairway. I turned to see Adeline with a cell phone held to her ear with one hand and Madeline with the other. I walked back to the playhouse to sit on the low stone garden, where lengths of dead snakes still squirmed. "Don't let her come over here or see this. It'll give her nightmares," I said, my vision blurring as I turned to lower myself onto the stone wall. I felt my back foot come down on something round and slippery. As I flung out my arms for balance, I saw a rope of bloody snake roll away. Then Colorado blue sky, and my head exploded.